All right, the next match on the program was the Women's Elimination Chamber match. And again, I will accept the criticism that I'm not the biggest fan of the girls wrestling these days because it's been diluted and watered down and etc. But can anybody suggest to me that it is a good idea to have two of the exact same gimmick matches on the same card, whether it's men and women or men and men or women and women or donkeys in Tijuana or whatever the case? Because it's like having dessert before you have dessert. It's a hat on a hat. Excuse me, Brian, before you have a piece of birthday cake, would you like some cake? And when they don't take it seriously, in the Women's Elimination Chamber were a couple of the top stars in the company. You've got Bianca Belair, and you've got Rhea Ripley, who should be a couple of the top stars in the company. You've also got Liv Morgan. They're trying for some reason.
Oh, she's good.
You've got Alexa Bliss, who's 5 feet nothing and weighs 95 pounds with rocks in her pockets and wet shoes.
She's not good.
And Dewdrop, who found all the weight that Alexa Bliss has failed to gain over her lifetime. And this, you got it. This would have been like if the fucking Mulkeys had been booked in a War Games. So anyway.
Against who? Against the Gladiators or against someone else?
That's what, anybody, just, And did I mention Nikki Ass? And Nikki Ass and Liv Morgan started, and all the women were covered neck to toe in their outfits. I resist the urge to do the Bobby Eaton line. Yeah, he had tape from his wrist all the way to his ankle. Rhea Ripley looked great. She looked like Catwoman. A couple of the other girls looked like they'd rolled out of bed at a slumber party with their pajamas on. It's ridiculous. Again, at least I remember the first time they had one girls match over there, they just wore sweatpants or whatever. And they were just blousy, flousy coverings. At least they're letting them color up a little bit. But by Jesus H. Christ, why have a girl's... It's like a low-fat Twinkie. If you can't eat the fat, don't eat the Twinkie. If the girls can't go over and do the same thing that they do, wearing the same thing that they do in every other part of the world, don't send the fucking girls. Is anybody going to be goddamn mortified? Oh, I can't go to Saudi Arabia, potentially risk my life in a hostage situation? Nevertheless, Rhea Ripley came in and looked like Catwoman, but nothing really happened. But then she beat Nikki Ass with the Riptide, thank goodness. And then Alexa Bliss came in, and this little microscopic, diminutive amoeba of a girl started beating people up. And I started zoning out because, honestly, Rhea Ripley would disappear, as you saw, for minutes at a time. But finally, toward the end of the thing, it's Ripley against Belair, and there was the most excitement of the match for about 30 seconds, and then the other girls got in the way and muddied the water all up. And then Belair beat Rhea Ripley, and that meant that the last two were Belair and Alexa Bliss. So what the fuck is worse? Her phony bullshit gimmick that it's not hers, they gave it to her. She does it well. I've said many times she should be in all kinds of horror movies. She's a spooky little girl. She's also bigger than a hiccup, just barely. And so now Alexa Bliss then gets beat by Bianca Belair, but Ripley couldn't even go to the finish. Alexa Bliss was the second best girl in that match. She's the same height and 5 pounds lighter than little darling Dagmar. Look it up, kids. I didn't disappoint you with little Brutus. What'd you think, Brian?
I think, forget about the match itself, but you watch something like this in Rhea Ripley, even though she was dressed like Rob Halford, And Bianca Belair, who, again, no matter what's happening in life, she's swinging that hair and smiling. They seem like main eventers. They seem like stars. They're not small. They look athletic. I buy them as main eventers. There's a little bit of a history with them, so it's always nice to see them work. They work well together. They're top tier. I know you don't see it, and I'm sure this week she'll do something awful, but I see Liv Morgan a little bit below that, but not at the bottom. Liv Morgan is a really good female babyface if used right, and she has a connection with the crowd. The Nikki Ash thing is awful, and there's no redeeming value in a grown-up who thinks she's going to be a superhero, I guess is the gimmick. Doudrop does not do it for me. There's a little bit of a pun there somehow, but... And then Alexa Bliss.
Who do Doudrop do it for?
I don't know,
but what do Doudrop do?
That's the dumbest name. When they introduce her, they don't even say like a town or a weight. So it's just, and then coming to the ring, Doudrop. Like, that's it? Okay. It's like Meatloaf. Hey, she's the female Meatloaf.
There you go. At least Mantar chose his own fate. That was his gimmick that he brought to them and said, do this with me, right? But I'm sure that this was not Doudrop's first choice for how to be presented.
And Alexa Bliss, and I know there are a lot of hardcore, I know we have a lot of people listen to this show, and it'll probably surprise people, who are hardcore WWE fans. They want us to talk more about it. They hate AEW. And amongst some of them, they really like Alexa Bliss, and I don't get it. And you're right. She's super small compared to everyone else. And she's hitting big moves. She was gone for a while. She has some sort of supernatural gimmick where even though she's so small, she's not afraid of anyone. When you see that in a match where you have a Bianca and a Rhea, it stands out about what the problem is. You have the people here, and I'm going to include Liv Morgan on that side. You could even include Doudrop, really, who you could kind of treat seriously and have a serious women's division. And then you have the classic Vince McMahon stuff of the girl who thinks she's a superhero because she's not smart, I guess, to realize she's not. And the other girl who has magical powers and magical dolls that she does magical things with. And that's the problem. It's like, if there was a universal, if Alexa Bliss was like the Young Bucks and she would just go have a segment with her friends and do their own thing and not interfere with the rest of this, would be good. But I think that's part of the problem. You have top tier quality female wrestlers in WWE, but they always have to intermingle with that kind of stuff, the Nikki Ashes and the Alexa Blisses, and it takes away from everything else.
But she does her magical things with her magical dolls and her magical skills. That's what she says. Is she magically delicious, I wonder?
I don't know. Her segments aren't.
A little hard to swallow, is man. Speaking of hard to swallow. Oh boy, 2 girls matches in a row and another one still left to come. Which again, and they couldn't even break it up a little bit. This is why nothing is special, because as soon as something gets over, they give it to you endlessly. 2 elimination chambers, 2 world championships, 3 girls matches on the same show, back to back. Nothing is allowed to become different. But in this case, it was definitely different because they took the most inexperienced worker out of the 4 of these and decided to tie her arm behind her back. So boy, that'll... This is another example of what happens when you get a bunch of people writing wrestling that have never been in a ring, and the people that have been in the ring have to produce what the wrestling writers write. Instead, if you've been reading the writs he's written, you'll know they're really well-written writs.